PCounsel Live.
Hold up.
Welcome to PCounsel Live, the legal technology and transformation podcast powered by Practice League. I'm Rohan Khanna, your host for today. In our last podcast, we discussed the different scenarios to consider when choosing the right tool for contract automation. But today, we want to take it a step further and talk about CLM readiness, something that we feel doesn't get enough attention. I mean, the significance of preparedness, frankly, cannot be overstated. And to help us understand that better, we have none other than Lucy Bassli herself. Lucy is an attorney and the founder of InnoLaw Group. She's a CLM consultant and legal advisor for efficient legal operations and commercial contracting. Lucy is a highly sought after legal industry expert working with corporate legal departments on modernizing legal service delivery and automation. She's the author of the acclaimed CLM Simplified, Efficient Contracting for Law Departments, and The Simple Guide to Legal Innovation, basics every lawyer should know. Lucy is based outside Seattle, Washington, and loves sharing her knowledge of contracting and legal operations. Hi, Lucy. A very good morning to you.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me.
You're most welcome. Lucy, frankly, we are very thrilled to have you on this podcast. I mean, like you, we love everything about contracts and innovation. And therefore, it's very encouraging to see a growing demand for contract automation solutions, especially CLMs, which has only accelerated in recent times. So, I mean, let's start with that. I mean, what is a CLM? And as per you, what factors led to this surge in demand?
Sure. Well, here's my favorite part of discussing CLM is really stepping back and clarifying that CLM, while it's become synonymous with the technology itself, CLM is actually it is the entire combination of people, process, and tools that go into managing this really complicated life cycle. A contract, right, it's born somewhere, it then travels places, and people touch it and do things with it, and then at some point it's signed and laid to rest. Oftentimes never to be touched again, but oftentimes touched quite a bit. So it is really this ongoing set of processes, and I think there's been a bit of an oversimplification when everybody immediately jumps to technology. And that's a bit of how do I put it? It's a bit of a disservice to the end users of all of these technology solutions, because oftentimes, as we're going to discuss in more detail, not everybody's ready for the technology. So CLM itself is a complex combination of people, process, and tools, all related to contracting. That's the short answer. But to maybe go to your second question, Ron, about this explosion in CLM technology, it's interesting. I don't have an answer for why it suddenly happened. I think we can all take guesses. I mean, I think this was a sleeping giant in many ways. I think we witnessed a similar explosion in e-discovery 10 plus years ago now, and it happened. There became a kind of feverish activity around it, and there were benefits to be seen, and there was technology that was evolving just in time. So there was a perfect storm, and I think there was maybe some significant litigation matters that made the news, and suddenly everything kind of work together. Well, I think in contracting that we can probably see a similar path. I mean, there also been a lot of needs to manage contracts better with all the changes in data security and privacy laws. It feels like that was probably the most substantive cause or catalyst for some focus on CLM. And then combined together with really legal tech being a sleeping giant, as we know, an industry that's been largely undisturbed, except or undisrupted, I should say, except for e-discovery, as I mentioned. So those, kind of natural factors came together, and then there seems to have been found a surplus of venture capital money that has been looking for a home.
Absolutely.
So I think that investment fueled this market frenzy, and so it's this combination, and a chicken and egg. I don't know what came first. Was there a very big drive and demand suddenly? Really, I mean, we've been struggling with contracting for 2 decades in most corporate settings, but that ongoing need, the venture capital focus back on the legal industry, the changes in laws and regulations that required suddenly a lot of attention to a lot of contracts across some very big companies seems to have all come together. Plus, coupled, I think, frankly, with an explosion in or evolution of the legal operations function. And so there were suddenly people that were coming together and sharing ideas and thoughts and best practices, and those professionals that were really a growing community of legal operations professionals also shed some light on the need in contract. So not an easy answer, but certainly a combination of factors, I would say.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree. It's not an easy answer for sure. I mean, it's a perfect storm, as you said, and I guess in some ways, our work is reflective of our life in general. So we're seeing technology becoming a part of everyday life. We're getting so used to our phones, our laptops. I mean, besides contracts, I mean, I don't see I use paper for anything else. I mean, paper is becoming redundant in our normal life. And I guess that's reflecting in our work as well. And as you correctly pointed out, I mean, the VCs, we're talking about other elements. I mean, legal technology in general, uh, being at the forefront now after fintech has been good signs. And, while this demand is good, do you think many users or new users underestimate the challenges they may experience during implementations, and are they really prepared for what's to come? Maybe because I once read users of a very large, well-known solution reported difficulties with implementations and upgrades. I mean, the clients primarily indicated differences between how the projects were initially scoped and then the implementation efforts that are actually required for it. So there was a huge gap. So what are your thoughts on this?
I think this goes to the crux of our conversation is readiness. I mean, it's one thing to want and be excited about technology and even implement it, but then what? And what we're seeing is right now a lot of unhappy customers, a lot of, I don't want to say failed implementations, because implementation, if that's the success itself, then sure, there are implementations, meaning systems go live, but adoption, use, consumption, expansion, is really, really quite low. Those are numbers that actually are very hard to find. Not surprisingly, tech providers don't want to share those. Nobody has openly discussed, renewals and an expansion of use cases and users and all that good data that I would love to see. I think look, it takes two to tango. I'm not going to point fingers at either side. Readiness is a joint responsibility, right? When you have taken on the responsibility of sharing a piece of technology, as we see more and more tech companies being held responsible and accountable for their solutions, it isn't just selling that magic button. And once the sale is complete, that's the first big parade and party, and then implementation goes live, and that's the next big parade. And then the tech providers are oftentimes nowhere to be found when the customer's having challenges and problems. So it takes two to tango. On the technology side, there's some things we'll talk about in a minute on what I think that the tech companies can do. But then let's talk, in-house, the buyer. Buyer beware. That is something we learn in law school, first year of law school, and in almost every U.S. law school that I think exists. Buyer beware. When you are buying something, you need to know how to use it, what it is it fit for purpose? And that's getting skipped, unfortunately, because of all that activity that we talked about and the excitement around CLM tech. There's money being thrown at it. There are budgets being allocated. Legal departments are excited just because they're getting some attention from the COO and the CFO and the CIO of their companies, because they desperately need the help. And these technology companies seem to, be coming with that answer. We're here to help you. You need help. Here we are. But there is so much more that needs to be done there. The reason I think this is it's uniquely challenging in CLM, and yes, it's my favorite topic, so I'm going to try to not be overly excited about it, making it sound special. But what makes it a little bit special, I think, is that it is truly a combination of legal and operations. It's a piece of technology that lives right at the intersection of lawyering. Lawyers value the big reason that we have jobs and go to law school, and the substantive, brain work that we like to do, and efficiencies and speed and business opportunity and business advancement and enabling the business. And so it's sometimes a conflict. Does speed and efficiency in contracting equal greater risk on the legal side? And that is the natural underlying tension that every CLM technology is kind of facing. And frankly, most aren't doing a good job. Not just addressing it, sorry, but most of them aren't doing a good job even really recognizing it, hearing it, being empathetic to it, understanding the shoes of the in-house legal team, the corporate legal team that's buying their system. So it takes two to tango. I think there's some responsibilities on both sides. And if I may, I think, Rohan, or I'll let you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your next related question is going to be, well, what should the legal tech companies be doing? What should
Absolutely.
Okay. Right. Yeah. And I don't want to steal your thunder, but I know I had hinted to it and you had alluded to it earlier as well. So let's talk about, a couple of things that I have on my radar for what might help. And some of the companies that I've talked with, I'm fortunate in that I sit in the middle and see both sides, and I'm tech agnostic in my consulting practice. We work with corporate law departments and whatever technology they choose. So I also always want to be very, very open about that. I don't care what the actual system is or which system. I think the system providers need to do a couple of things. One, as a solution provider, they need to have a better understanding of the processes that their system is fitting into inside that company or that legal department. Usually it's broader than the legal department, as we know. What I'm seeing is sales professionals at these companies that really have very, very little knowledge about the contracting lifecycle itself, about even the structure of a corporate legal department and where it fits in the company, about the users, their accountabilities, their definitions of success, not to mention just contracts. Understanding a little bit about what goes on inside of a contract and the four corners of the document, as well as how it lives inside of their prospective customer, is critical. So what I see is a disconnect between the sales professionals and the potential customers that they're trying to acquire. There's simply a mismatch of taxonomy and the conversation. It's clear to me these are people from different worlds that are trying to have a conversation.
That's a very important point you mentioned. I mean, so if we go to the history of the contract management systems, we realize, legal CLM is relatively newer concept. Contract management systems have been there, but I think predominantly, the legacy tools were focusing more on procurement or sales. Buy side, sell side. There were separate systems for both. But I guess in the last few years, people have realized contracts are not just about buying and selling. There's a whole legal aspect to it. It's a very complicated process. As you mentioned, CLM is not just about tools. It's an entire process in itself. So I'm assuming that's where the disconnect lies, because there are some tools that, or I wouldn't blame them, but products are coming in from directions of sales, procurement, and suddenly they're realizing they're talking to legal teams where maybe they do not have the right set of understanding. Does that happen in your experience a lot?
Well, that's exactly what's happening. There is definitely a growth of there's kind of the pre-existing CLM products that were around before this craze. We know some of those big names and players. They've been around for a while. They're probably all exhausted going, oh my God, we've been trying to do this for over a decade. And now everybody is a CLM tech company. But you're right. They had very much a business goal, a business focus in their product. It was for more effective and efficient procurement or less so, but sometimes on the sales and revenue generating side, right? It was truly about contract management, which is a business function. I'll be the first to argue and
Correct.
push any legal team to stay out of contract management. Contract negotiation, contract review, those are all things legal plays a role in, but please not contract management. Now, some do. They're either over-functioning or they're filling a gap or there's a lack of trust or there's a million reasons why that can happen, but that is definitely not the best practice. So there's an argument to be made that some of those, maybe older, more, let's call them more stable or more mature CLM tech providers, right? They had that business focus in mind. Now with that, they really weren't doing a good job of helping integrate that legal function, because legal tends to act special. In a corporate setting, legal tends to act special. They're one of the few departments that can simply put a stop, a halt to business, intentionally or unintentionally. I don't know which one's worse, but they can really stop the business. So yes, there's a really interesting point to be made there on that evolution of CLM tech, starting from a business focus, and now what we've seen in the last few years, again, coupled with the growth of the legal operations functions, which brought attention to the legal department needing newer, better systems, and the legal regulatory requirements that touch contracts, suddenly created a bit of a new customer or a new prospective target for the CLM tech companies. And they have to use different words. They have to use different words. They have to use different concepts. The features have to function a little bit differently. And that there is definitely an evolution, I think, happening there as well with what CLM was before this frenzy and where it's evolving. And I don't think we know yet. I think the next few years are going to be fascinating. I think in the next 5 years, there will be a ton of acquisitions. They're going to be the big, huge players that are the big multi-legal service providers, the Wolters Kluwers, the LexisNexis, the Thomson Reuters, in one bucket. Then there's going to be the big four in another bucket. I don't know what McKinsey's going to do or BCG's going to do, but they sure have GCs, that they have to deal with because the CFO is sending them there. The CFOs who bring in these consultants are saying, go talk to legal. Well, legal's going to have CLM on their radar. They just are these days. And then you're going to have the acquisitions and the mergers happening amongst the different CLM tech and CLM related technologies, because there are a lot of point solutions that touch contracts. Correct. Right, that aren't life cycle management solutions. So the taxonomy is a mess, and there's only a few of us that are out there trying to actually clear it up. I think, frankly, some are benefiting from the mess because they get to sell things.
No, it's helping. I mean, you said it's a very new market for both sides. I mean, there are CLM service providers getting to know the importance of legal, frankly. A lot of them have not been part of legal technology. And then at the other end, we have legal teams who are not used to technology that much. For them, they're now getting exposed to so many options. I mean, something interesting. I read a few reviews of your book, CLM Simplified. I mean, they're fantastic. One of the readers, a general counsel for a technology company, mentioned that Lucy Bassli's lessons learned are invaluable to anyone embarking on a complex journey of CLM optimization. In this case, they're referring to CLM as the process. But going back to the review, they further added that this book breaks down the approach into manageable steps that anyone can follow. And that's the interesting part, because while interacting with many legal teams, we've learned that they are actually, I would say, wary of the large monetary time and resource investment that's required by a traditional CLM and the experiences maybe they've heard of or they've gone through in the past. But now, with the emergence of new technologies, customers are expecting their desired systems to be implemented quickly without significantly straining their teams and existing resources. So what would you recommend to such teams? What are the critical steps they should follow to simplify their process at their end?
So there are a lot of levers. I always think of all of these as not sequential. There isn't a wrong way necessarily to make improvements. As long as you're making improvements, you're already winning. I think most legal teams they're just a bit trapped in this volume of work. It's this never-ending tidal wave of contract work that doesn't end, and it's very hard to stop and make some changes. So a couple of tips I would recommend that anybody can do tomorrow. And maybe there is one that comes before the rest, and then the rest are levers that you can pull in at different points and different times. But the first thing that I think every legal department needs to do is really question and maybe redefine the types of contracts that they are involved in. That's the first, I think, step to recovery, if I may, for those who have an ailment of contracting. Legal overfunctions in many ways, and in many departments is doing things that are well beyond really what they were brought into the company to do. These are often expensive resources, and they're spending their time on things like chasing signatures. Did that ever get signed? I don't know. Who's got it? Who's signing? Where's the signer? That is a crazy, terrible misuse of an attorney's time. So I would say first step, understand what the legal department should be reviewing. Make a decision. Take some smart risks and write it down. Create a policy. Policy is a big word. It all depends on the culture of the company, what that word might mean. Call it a guide, call it it doesn't matter what you call it, but have an opinion and have a firm position on what legal should and shouldn't do. So that really is, I would say, sequentially the first step.
Like an SOP for
them. Go ahead.
Like an SOP, a standard operating procedure for them?
Standard operating procedures, absolutely. Now, you and I know what that means. 95% of the attorneys in a law department are going to say, what? You're calling my day job an SOP? That's already part of the cultural challenges we have with law departments and lawyers, acting like it's a specialized art when some of it is operational. But I absolutely agree with you. Yes, write something down. Call it something to say, this is what legal, these are contracts legal wants to be involved in, or do the reverse. These are contracts legal doesn't have to be involved in. So you could be kind of on a proactive or a reactive policy statement, however works for the culture of the company. Then from there, this is where you have different levers. So if we go back to, was it the 80s or the 90s, and the DJs had all those little dials they would move up and down when they were doing the music at a party. I never understood how they had like 20 different dials and levers, but I think that's what we have in CLM. So the key ones that a law departments can immediately focus in on are, of course, templates. Well, what contract templates do they have for use in their own department? If you have more than 3 lawyers, you're going to have 20 different versions of the same NDA. That's already a problem. So let's always start with an NDA. That's my favorite example. Make sure you have a template. Even if you're a tiny company and don't have the leverage to push your own template, sometimes the other side just may not have one to give you either. So have a template to start with. Now, can that template be used by the business? Even better. Now you have a template that can also be handed to the business to use without legal's involvement. Wonderful. You've just conquered 2 problems with one small, hopefully 3-page document. It just needs a little time to be written. So templates are one thing. The next thing is then a playbook or a negotiation guide related to that template. I hear the word playbook now used a lot. Lots and lots of use of that. Another area where we need some taxonomy. I'm going to be very specific intentionally, and I'm calling it a negotiation guide. So if you've created a template that can be used by the business, let's help the business not just fill in the name and the signing date, but maybe the business can also be enabled and empowered to negotiate a few concepts. So now a negotiation guide, that is a next lever that legal departments can pull to get themselves out of this never-ending volume of work. Together with those 2 things, also very helpful is a roles and responsibilities matrix. Once you have that initial policy statement or operating procedure, there needs to be an understanding across the business and certainly the leadership across the C-suite of who's accountable for certain parts of a contracting life cycle. For example, signature. Let's put that into a roles and responsibilities matrix. It could be part of the policy, it doesn't have to be part of the policy, but getting that high-level understanding, even starting the conversations across the C-suite about contracting, they're often the lifeline of the business. yet they're perceived as this annoying stumbling block, but they're not. Contracts are the vehicle by which companies make money and spend it, by the way. So roles and responsibilities matrix, that's another, connected piece to all of this. And then, of course, we have technology. But to me, the technology is the automation and the expediting of these various things we discussed, right? Whether it's template creation or access to templates or the workflow, pushing it to the right people based on a roles and responsibilities matrix. That automation comes, last, hopefully. And you've done some of these things already to enable and empower. But the first step is legal has to get out of doing some of the contracts that really are just not a valuable use of their time. And that's just a hard fact that everybody has to look in the mirror and make some difficult choices.
Absolutely. I mean, at one point, we have to understand how much work is causing a problem. I mean, for example, as you mentioned, these are very important points. I mean, policy, template, playbook, the matrix. And at times, people may not realize this is not an ongoing exercise. This might be a one-time exercise. And once you have done this, you are going to be reaping rewards for years to come. For people who join later on, how simple work will be for them. And at some point, you'll be reducing the volumes of work that you handle on a day-to-day basis. You can smartly use technology to do the grunt work and focus more on the decision-making aspects, I would say the subject matter part of contracting rather than the manual work, which I'm sure nobody any which ways likes. So it's a one-time requirement, I'm sure. And with technology being incorporated, all these elements later on, as you said, I mean, can just be quickly, neatly tied up and eliminated for the long-term future. Now, one thing that, I wanted to check up because we're making changes in policies, we are introducing playbooks. I'm assuming legal teams are doing this for other parts as well of the department besides contracts, for matters, for intellectual properties, the legal operations in general. So do you think CLM should be part of their larger legal operation strategy, or should it be outside as a separate domain?
Oh, that's a tough one. It's a good one. It's kind of a spicy topic that I find myself opining on regularly because I kind of lived that world. My operations experience grew out of contracting. I'm a commercial transactions lawyer and realized over my course of my 13 years at Microsoft doing this, wow, there's certainly an operational aspect to my job, and I loved it. And so I really, dove in deep there. And then adopted other parts of the legal operations function and ran a broader portfolio beyond CLM at Microsoft, and then did the same at Snowflake for a short period. So it's interesting you ask that. The skill set of a legal operations professional can be quite varied. And legal ops, because it's evolving, and what it means to be, director of legal ops at a company can look very different across companies. Some come from a finance background, and they are fantastic at managing spend, law department spend, overall budget of the department. And some of these departments are 1,500 plus people. I mean, these are, I was part of
big
one.
teams.
They're super big. And so having somebody with that kind of finance background is critical. I mean, they have entire teams of people managing their finances. But that's one path that people land in the legal operations role. And you can see from the general counsel's goals that that's a top priority. And it makes sense that that's the person they would hire into that type of a role called director of legal ops. But the background, there's no training, right? There's no certification in legal ops. So finance is one. Another one is IT, technology, systems analysts, business analysts, those kind of folks. They come into legal ops and they are focusing on the technology roadmap. This is where CLM gets kind of appended into it, tacked on, so to speak, because they're looking at systems, right? Systems and tools, whether it's spend management, matter management, anything management. Contracting falls into that. And then you, of course, have those legal ops folks that are, kind of a chief of staff, business manager, and they're looking at the rhythm of the business of the department, the strategic goals of the department, KPIs, that kind of thing. And finally, you have lawyers like me who are just the weirdos who love tech and process and data and morph into a legal operations function. So, it's a good question. I feel like those of us who get contracting, because it's a domain, sure, we can help create a CLM program, because it is a program. It is not just technology, as we started our conversation with. But I get worried when CLM is added on to a list of responsibilities to a legal ops generalist. I think, if they focus on acquiring the proper CLM technology, and that's their goal, then they have to be paired with a domain expert. They have to be paired with a in-house attorney who lives that work. I think that's what we get missed. So, I'm going to say the short answer is no. CLM should not be tacked on to a legal operations function unless that legal ops leader either has or has somebody on their team who has practiced in the commercial contracting area. And I do say practice because in the US, that's a very specific designation of what it means to practice law. And our line is very, very, very dark and thick as opposed to other jurisdictions. But I think there comes an inherent knowledge of risk mitigation, risk assumption, risk, knowledge that is necessary to have a well-functioning CLM technology platform, assuming what we mean is really the full life cycle, right? It's from
Absolutely.
creating templates, right? Creating templates requires knowledge of clauses and substantive information, to workflow, which is less, that's pure operational, to then the extraction of key terms and storage during the storage process. And suddenly also somebody needs to make sure the system is pulling out the right terms. So anyway, it's again, it's an answer that I have to give with a little bit of caution. I'm sure I'll upset some folks, but I do
No,
feel
absolutely
like
not. Absolutely not. I think
special.
there is no right answer for this. I guess that's where the role of experts and outsiders comes into play, right? I mean, not every legal team will have expert for every function within the department immediately. I mean, the large teams, of course, they may have the luxury of having separate teams. So that's where, let's say, for example, a technology company, while they may understand that within the legal function you'll have legal ops as a separate unit, you'll have contracting as a separate unit, but that does not stop the technology from integrating them at some point, so that the general counsel has a consolidated view of both of these, so you're not burdening the respective functions. At the ground level, they are independently managing their own portfolios. Legal ops is separately managing the entire legal operations. You have contracting team managing the contracting. The both are not mixing at the ground level, but at a top level, at an organizational level, there is a synergy. The general counsel has complete visibility of the entire legal portfolio. And it's not just the technology company there. I feel at times it might do good to companies to even onboard a champion for contracting from outside, who may understand, like you said, most technology companies do not understand the contracting processes. And on the other hand, legal teams may not understand the technology part. So there could be a role for somebody else to bridge that gap. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there is definitely a role for kind of this translator, mediator that is critical. So whether that person sits in the legal ops team or in an IT team, right? I don't know if it matters as long as that function, that role exists, which is why it is a cautious answer of whether CLM should be part of legal ops. It can be. Like I said, if the goal is to manage a technology portfolio and one of those pieces of technology procured by the legal department is a CLM system, then sure, that business analyst or systems analyst or system admin should be in a legal ops team, no doubt. But the ability to translate the business requirements or the needs of those attorneys and the legal team that are going to be using the system, translating those to technology, that's not something everybody can do. That is a tough one, right? Because
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll use my favorite example, the word template. A lot of CLM tech companies initially, at least, the ones that I would deal with or I'd hear about, like, yeah, they're going to put in our template. They mean their system template, their form fields. The template also means the rules by which the operation, the flows. They don't mean a Word document, contract template. And I'm using I know we're not on video, but the fingers, right, of the four corners of a contract. And so that was the first sign where I realized, oh my goodness, what a complete mismatch. So yeah, somebody needs to translate. Definitely.
Absolutely. And I think that's another area. I mean, so if I go back, I mean, step back to, the contracting department as well. I mean, so if I go outside the legal operations domain for now, um, one other thing we've observed at times is expectations when it comes to readiness. So, for example, I mean, as a legal department or contracting department, I is it how important is it to realize what are your pertinent challenges? Why are you really opting for a CLM? Because I've seen oftentimes during the evaluation process, I mean, teams do get swayed away by marketing that technology companies have. We have these hundreds of features. You start comparing products on features maybe you would not even use, and suddenly you're in a situation where you have a massive implementation on your hands. You only wanted to utilize maybe a contract repository, or you wanted e-signing capabilities with that repository. But now you're talking about AI, you're talking about machine learning, you have blockchain, and you have so many things at your end, and that implementation just goes on and on and on. And how often does that happen?
Yes. It happens often that there's a mismatch of the goals, the problems that are trying to be solved, and the technology that is actually procured. So, you're hitting on kind of another core crux where it takes two to tango. Matching the problem to be solved with the solution, that's why it's called a solution, that's just not happening. And I think everything's being thrown into the CLM bucket. And what you just described, yeah, blockchain, that's not CLM technology. Frankly, artificial intelligence is like becoming a piece of it, but it's an enabler. But I have clients come to me going, yeah, what about AI? I want to buy a system with AI. I need AI. What are you talking about? So it's there's a mismatch, and that's where, again, tech companies really need to be able to say, hey, I don't think we're the right solution for you, or
Correct.
try to help categorize these problems in a way that says, okay, here's what we're here to really solve. Again, right now there's a mess, and there's some interests that are in conflict with clearing up the mess. So there's definitely a confusion of what the technology really is, and what it's trying to solve. And I don't know how to, besides shouting off the top of the roof for everyone, communicate better, be clear, ask questions. I don't know how to help solve it at a macro level because it's pretty widespread.
The communication is the key. I mean, if I was to summarize this, I mean, the first thing that you mentioned was spot on, that, CLM is not just technology. It's not just one. I mean, it's more often referred to as technology these days. It's the entire process, and it has to start at the ground level. Like you said, you have to start making notes. You have to prepare for things right at the start. I mean, what changes are you going to make? And based on that, you would automatically know what you need. And then you go out in the market, you take help of experts or anything if you need, that is, and look at criteria that you've already identified, you've already documented it. So it's very difficult for you to now go wrong because the process, the definitions are already in place before you go out. So I think the crux of it was exactly what you've mentioned right at the start.
Well, what's interesting is, you make a very healthy assumption, is that the requirements were clear and written down. You said written down, right? It's, I don't want to say shocking anymore. I'm no longer shocked. It is expected that teams are buying CLM systems without actually having gone through a requirements gathering exercise. Very little is written down. What's written down are more like hopes right? Wishes, they are not written down in a requirements document that can then be submitted as part of an RFP, and used for conversation and buying. It's a big miss. It's a huge gap right now. And again, tech companies have a little responsibility there to say,
Correct.
show me your requirements. Actually, show me. Don't talk to me about them, show me. And if they can't, then offer to spend the time to gather requirements. Sit with your prospect and make sure the requirements match, or else at the end, the system won't be perceived as successful either. And then there's reputation risks, lawsuits we're seeing. I mean, there's a lot that's happening. So yeah, requirements are a core key step for system planning, selection, implementation, everything.
And that's so important. So let's say if we were to summarize, the readiness, so if we started off with CLM readiness, what would be the 3 most important takeaways that you would like to share with our listeners? Or
Number
3 or
one,
anything. Yeah.
Sure. No, you have to limit me, or else the podcast will be a 4-hour podcast. We need top 3 things, top 3 considerations. Number 1, identify and prioritize the problems to be solved. The actual problems and the pain points, list those out. Once you have the top pain point, from there, craft requirements. Interview internal people, stakeholders, who's going to be touching and living in this system, but write down the requirements. The requirements can be long. These are wish lists, but the wish lists have to be actionable and automatable. Let's make sure the requirements gathering is facilitated by somebody who has experience with systems implementations or product, solutioning, that kind of a function. So, and then the third is change management planning. Get your stakeholders ready psychologically, get your champions aligned, get your stakeholders, your leaders on board with the fact that change is coming. They don't need to know the nuances and the details, but everybody has to be ready for change, and that's top down. So, top 3 things. 1, understand your pain points and prioritize them. 2, gather and write down detailed technology requirements with the help of somebody who's done that before. And 3, change. Get ready for changes by getting the right sponsors and stakeholders identified.
Perfect. I think I couldn't agree more with that. And I guess that's all the time, unfortunately, we had today. This was a very engaging discussion, Lucy, with many valuable suggestions. We really thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're most welcome. And thank you to all our listeners. If you'd like to learn more about contracts or other aspects of legal technology, then please join our group, Legal Technology and Transformation, on LinkedIn. For more episodes, don't forget to check out pcounsel.live. Thank you for tuning in, and stay safe.